again, Newatel, through its international company Tata, has been able to buy capacity from Set 3, for instance. The fact of the matter is still that the landing station in South Africa is still controlled by Telkom. So Telkom still controls directly the kind of pricing that comes out of that international circuit. So again, our country is really not the way it's supposed to be from a cost of international bandwidth perspective. This has resulted in a very slow growth in terms of data markets. You will know, for instance, that in South Africa, when it comes to content, we're not really the biggest hosters of content. Most of the content that we use is still located offshore. So from an access and in a web surfing perspective, you still have to go overseas to be able to gain access to that kind of content. And if that content you have to go through very uncompetitive international blended prices, it makes it difficult for a whole lot of people that otherwise would have been able to have access to that kind of content to have that kind of access. If you sit in an internet shop right now, you sit for about 15 minutes, and in most areas you get charged from 30 to 40 rand for sitting there for 20 minutes. And what you literally have there is, if you're surfing and you're trying to get into international content, the bigger portion of what you're paying goes to that cost, and that cost doesn't come cheaply in the South African market. Again, another area that is still very problematic in South Africa is that of interconnection. You will know, for instance, that right now, more than 40 million mobile subscribers sit in all three mobile operators. Now, if you're a new entrant, you're coming in and you're trying to compete with the Vodacoms and MTNs and the SLCs of this world, what you literally have to do, for instance, is to go to what is called interconnection. Interconnection really speaks to an ability of one operator to be able to terminate or hand over calls to another operator. Right now in South Africa, if you need to hand over a call to Vodacom or to MTN, you will have to pay them 125. So basically, if you're a new operator coming into the market and you are able to provide 50 cents as a cost for a call, if that call has to terminate, that 50 cents basically can only be a benefit that you give or you keep online. Because the moment that call has to terminate in either Vodacom or MTN network, you have to build on top of that 50 cents 125, which is what you have to pay for that operator to be able to receive that call from your network as the new operator. This has meant one thing in South Africa, that we do not have as aggressive as we can possibly have from a voice competition perspective. And as a result, again, government has been trying to make various attempts to try and say that the cost of interconnected South Africa is way too high. For instance, I think as early as about last week, Namibia has got 2 mobile operators. It came up with a resolution that basically has said to them that they must reduce their calls from about 106 cents to about 60 cents. And again, that is the realization that the cost of terminating calls in this country remains very prohibitive, and as a result, what you get in the market is various mobile products that in reality, they've got very negligible differences from a pricing perspective. And that is precisely because from an interconnection perspective, mobile operators pay each other exactly 125 cents, and that remains very, very prohibitive in the market. Again, the last point I want to touch on is the vertical structure of the market. Again, this basically refers to a situation where you have someone like Telkom and Newatel who play in the wholesale market and also play in the retail market. So if you're a competitor that wants to operate in the retail market, you have to buy your back-end services from either Telkom or Newatel at a wholesale price. But at the same time, you still have to go in and compete with them at the retail market. What that has done to the market, unfortunately, is a situation where they will give you margins which are very, very little and give you very, very little room to move. And as a result, again, this country is suffering from a perspective of having retail services that are far less, from a community perspective, are performing far less than they're supposed to be. So I think just briefly, this is really the background that we have in this country, and this is really what government has finally realized. And I think they're making strides to change. So I think what we've moved from basically in this country is what is called managed liberalization, which was a policy that was championed by the late Minister Ivy Matsepe-Kasiburi. And this is really a policy that is based on saying, allow only a handful of operators in the market for a period of time, give them exclusivity, and hopefully during that period of time, they will be able to roll out services to the length and breadth of the country. And that has happened in this country. Telkom was licensed as a monopoly, and it was not by design that they were the only operator in the fixed line market. It was not by design or by mistake that Vodacom and MTN for the past 10 or 15 years were the only 2 mobile operators, and SLC only came into the market recently. That was part of the managed liberalization approach that government decided to take. And I think, unfortunately, it's a strategy that has backfired, because what you see now, you see a country where if you go to the rural areas, you will find people walking around with cell phones. But they use those cell phones to receive calls rather than to make them, because the cost of making those calls is just way too high. So what you typically get is, person in the rural areas, or even in the townships where some of us come from, they use the phone to receive the call, but when they have to make the call, they will walk into a public phone, and that's where the call that goes out gets made. And that really speaks to the issue that whilst we were focusing on penetration of these services, there was less focus on the affordability of such services. And now we sit with a market where penetration has taken place, I think, fairly well, but the pricing remains very, very prohibitive. I think what government has done finally is really then to pass legislation which coincidentally was called the Convergence Bill when it started, but I think when it took the process of going through Parliament, it later became known as the Electronic Communications Act. And what this legislation has really done is to try and change the market. You will know, for instance, that South Africa comes from a market where we had vertical silos. PSTS, for instance, is where you would have someone like Telkom and Network City. That refers to public telecommunication services. Those were the two fixed line providers. Those were the only people that can provide fixed line services. You had mobiles, and that's where the 3 mobile sit. You had signal distribution, that's where Centec sits. You had multimedia, that's where iBest, and that's where Centec sits. And then you had VANs. VANs are traditionally your ISPs. And if I can just mention that Internet Solutions was one of the players that played in that space. I think what is most important here is that these were the only players that were allowed to access spectrum in South Africa. Basically, therefore, these were the only players that can play in the fixed line space and play in the wireless space. Everybody else had to buy services from these operators. What this new legislation has done is to really just change the market and create a more horizontal structure of the market and move away from the vertical structure. So what you literally have now is communications network, which is really your network level of the market, and you've got the services, and you've got applications, and you've got broadcasting. Really, what has happened is a situation where right now, as opposed to the past, if you're Vodacom, you are able to provide not just mobile services, but you're able to provide fixed services as well. You're able to provide satellite services if that is your business case. So really, legislation has moved from telling you what kind of network you can provide in the market to really where your own customers can tell you what kind of network you can roll out in the market. So gone are the days where Telkom can only do the fixed line service. You would have heard the CEO of Telkom, Ms. Pinky Moholi, very recently saying that Telkom, one of the things that Telkom is going to be doing very, very soon is to go into the mobile space and actually begin to provide mobile services. I think it's going to be CDMA-based services, but they're going to be playing in the mobile space as well. And that is really because of the new opportunities that this new market has now created. I think as Internet Solutions as well, we're one of the biggest internet service providers in the country. And one of the biggest problems we've had up until now was the fact that we could not provide our own infrastructure services. We had to go and buy those services. And if you're buying them in a monopoly environment, you can imagine the cost that you have to pay for those services. So I think what government is trying to do is really create a more easy kind of entry into the market so that to allow a lot more players to be able to come and compete. And then if you look at the services of the market, that's the same thing again. No longer is Vodacom and MTN the only player that can provide mobile services. As I've indicated, Telkom can do that, Internet Solutions can do that. Any player now that has got a communication services license can play in that space. Applications or license-free layer, this is the layer where if you're providing or you are reselling services that belong to somebody else in the market, whereas in the past you had to have some form of a license, which was typically an ISP license. Going forward, legislation says that you don't need to have a license. So if you're going to come into the market as a reseller, there's no need for you to have a license. All you need is a back-to-back deal with the player whose services you're going to be providing, and then right there you're able to provide the services in the market. And on top of that, you have broadcasting. That is where your SABC, your multi-choice, and players sit. So literally what we have now is a market that has got those 4 layers that I've referred to. And then I think critically, there's also radio frequency spectrum. And this is the area that allows you to provide wireless services. So I think, what you will see, for instance, under the new regime is someone like SABC or ETV, they will have 2 licenses. That would be a broadcasting license, and that would be a radio frequency license. And if you look at someone like Nawatel or Internet Solutions, they'll have 3 licenses. That would be a network license, that would be your communication service license, and that would be your spectrum license. So literally now, I think we're at an era where convergence is becoming a reality. We're sitting on top of converged networks. Literally, it's customers now that demand what kind of networks must be rolled out into the market. it's no longer your license that tells you what kind of flights.